Baker Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Monday again, and that means it's time for another week of live Kev Baker shows right here on your number one network, Truth Frequency Radio, www.TFR Live. Now, do me a big, huge, massive favour. If you're logged into Facebook or Twitter or any of these social media sites right now, how about just going over there quickly? It'll take 2 seconds and share the link for the show. Because tonight, let me tell you, it is going to be another big, important show. Another new guest to welcome onto the Kev Baker Show as well. But before I get to all of that, I'm not alone tonight. And when I was kind of putting together ideas and topics that are going to fit for tonight's show and tonight's guest, it became really clear really quickly that one person that would be a really good fit with all of this is my good friend, Jimmy Jeans. So, Jimmy, welcome back to KBS, my man. And this is almost going to be like some kind of really brilliant Freaky Friday, only on a Monday on KBS. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I can't wait. I'm super excited about the guest. And we even have a small past that we didn't realize that we had, which is interesting. So there's synchronicity tonight, Kev, for sure. I can feel it in the air.
The entanglements are taking place both before the show, and I'm sure it's going to get much deeper and much better as time goes on. Because last week, myself and Jimmy, we were covering a number of topics that you could say fit under the umbrella of transhumanism, Human 2.0. Now, we spoke last week, first of all, about a speech that was given by Ben Goertzel. Now, our good friend, our mutual friend here, and the guest will become clear in a moment, Mr. Clyde Lewis, he was talking very much about these topics as well. And living to 1,000 years old was the topic of a speech by Ben Goertzel, and he was referring to a story that had been published by another of these transhumanists. And they were arguing, they were postulating, putting forward the idea that right now on the planet, somebody alive is going to be the first person to live to 1,000 years old. Now, we spoke about a test that had been approved where 20 brain-dead patients were literally going to be experimented on to see if they could reanimate their dead brains, literally resurrecting them and bringing them back to life. In another story, we spoke about the artificial eggs that are now being made in laboratories. And that took us into topics like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where we'll end up getting babies out of incubator factories. Bit extreme, I know. But you start adding up all of the technologies and all of the talk out there by the leading futurists, namely people like Craig Venter, George Church, all these kind of characters. Ray Kurzweil, another famous one. And you can see that we are moving towards becoming something new. And everything is changing, folks. We talk about the earth changes, we talk about the Mandela effects, and even right down to our genetics, what makes us human, our source code. Even that right now is going through a process of change. And we've all heard of Homo erectus, but tonight we're going to be talking about Homo Technicus. That's right, the next step in evolution. Are we destined to become something more than we are right now? Is the technology that we're producing and creating right now going to be leading to our eventual downfall? Well, all of this and more we're going to get into tonight, because I am joined by Mr. Ryan Gable. Now, if any of you haven't heard of Ryan, and I've often listened to Ryan sharing airtime with Clyde Lewis, so this is a big honour and a pleasure for me tonight. What Ryan is, he's a veteran radio personality and producer for his show, The Secret Teachings. Now, his broadcast focuses on the synchronicity of alternative news, health, history, philosophy, the paranormal, symbolism, the occult, esoteric, alchemy, magic with a K, and more, in the most distinct ways by finding parallels and patterns often overlooked. Now, spending much of his life on air, I know that feeling, and having written several books, Ryan has also been a guest on dozens of other shows and networks, from CBS and Dark Matter to LNM and Fringe FM, and is also a frequent guest on the brilliant Ground Zero Radio. Now, Ryan and the Secret Teachings are not aligned with any specific ideology, so that they may stay fluid with information as it is unveiled. Now, he holds himself to the same standard and recommendations suggested on air or in his writings in relation to food or study. He focuses on critical thinking and objectivity as keys to understanding, utilizing, and appreciating the secret teachings of all ages. You can find his website at thesecretteachings.info. That's thesecretteachings.info. And his own show is on Monday to Friday at 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. Pacific time in the US. So, Ryan, at long last, my man, welcome to the Kev Baker Show.
Kevin, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's kind of surreal, dude, because I'm used to hearing that kind of silky voice with Clyde Lewis. So, again, I must thank you for reaching out, and I'm really glad, that the universe has dictated that now is the time to do this show, because we had messaged each other a number of weeks ago, and obviously we didn't know the stories that were going to be going out in the press. We didn't know the direction that our friend Clyde Lewis would be taking last week. But it seems to me almost as if these synchronicities said, you know what, guys, tonight's the night to get this information out there.
That's how you do your show. That's how I do my show as well. I'm astounded the number of times I prepare something and then I go to social media and I see that Clyde is talking about the exact same thing the night that I'm talking about it.
And Ryan, there's some people out there that they might say, well, Kev, we've seen you talking about the same thing as Clyde as well. And, my show comes on before Clyde, and I know there's people may think that there's almost some kind of collusion or some plagiarism even going on at times, but I think it's something different. And I think it's a frequency. I think it's an energy. And not that we're more special than anyone else, Ryan, far from it. But I think people like myself, you and Clyde, we're all tapping into the same information source at the same time. And I think that's why we end up almost identifying and following the same patterns at a similar time. What do you think, man?
Well, when I listen to your show, Kev, and of course listening to Clyde's show and being on Clyde's show many times, I know that from what I've heard from your show and from all the times I've listened to Clyde's show, neither one of you have a belief to defend. You let your guests speak, you present your own point of view, and if somebody says something that might be considered offensive to someone, you allow them to speak. And it's that open type of discourse and not defending with reflex action, not defending with emotion, looking at things objectively that allows us to come to very similar conclusions by not leaning left, not leaning right, not leaning back, and not leaning forward, but leaning where information takes us. And when we do that, I think that puts us all on the same track.
Absolutely. Myself and Anthony Patch, we describe it as going to 30,000 feet, maybe even 90,000 feet, because only by looking at all different sides and opinions on the one topic and being able to analyze them without getting emotional, Ryan, only then can you really think critically. And I tell you what, you being like myself, we speak to so many different people on so many different topics. And again, that doesn't make us better than anyone else, but we're able, I think, to see more patterns than most, just because of the wealth and the variety of information that we really try to absorb.
I've always found it interesting since I started researching things probably when I was about 18, 19 years old as I got into radio. And I found that no matter where you start, you could start on the subject of food. A lot of people dislike when I do a show on food because they say that's not paranormal, that's not occult, that's not interesting, that's not mysterious. And I inform them that actually food and health are one of the main things that we can do, that we can take control of in our own lives, that transcends politics and religion, that transcends all of the dividing elements, and it allows us to be empowered as individuals. And it relates to the secret societies and mystery schools in Greece and in Egypt and places like Mesopotamia, where certain types of food was prohibited during initiation, certain types of food were consumed during initiation, and food is important in that way for many different reasons, especially if you talk to psychics. A lot of psychics will say that if you consume certain types of food, it prevents you from accessing those extrasensory perceptions. So whether it's food or whether you dive right into the paranormal, you find it all connecting in the end. It's like a giant tapestry. It's all woven together very intricately.
Oh, absolutely. I often talk about this golden thread that is kind of weaving everything together. And the subject of food there, it's quite important that you bring that up, because I've been thinking about this, not recently, but in the recent past. And look how we treat our machines. If we spend a lot of money on a nice motor vehicle, we absolutely take the time to make sure that we're putting in the right fuel, the right oils. We take care of it on a regular basis. Same if we have a nice fancy computer. We always make sure it's running up to date. We're not putting anything crap into it so it doesn't slow it down, opening it up, cleaning it up. And yet the most fantastic machine on this whole planet has to be the human body. And Jimmy, I'll bring you in at this point, because if only we spent as much time learning about what we put into our human body and the effects that it could have on all the mechanisms and all the systems that play in there. Ryan's right. There is a kind of magic to this as well.
I think you guys are both 100% correct. That's sort of similar to the same outlook that I have. I don't really find what I try to do is apply the same technique with whatever I do, with the same sort of with the same sort of eye. In other words, yeah, you're right. There is no difference between JFK and the food that we're eating, because both of those things have a lot of there's a lot of things going on behind everything we eat and everything we do and everything we see on the media, and it's more than meets the eye. And so I think what you have on your website, "Wisdom is not bestowed, it is achieved," is a really powerful statement, because information without experience is just information. And I think you do get the wisdom with the boots on the ground and doing the actual digging and researching to find out that just about everything we've been told publicly is not true.
Absolutely. And, Jimmy's right there, Ryan. I suppose you can arm yourself with all the information in the world, and you can learn everything about the engine from a textbook, but does that mean you can really be put in front of one and put it together? So, this wisdom that Jimmy's talking about, I think that's the path that we're all treading along right now, to eventually have that wisdom. But with all the information that's coming at us, especially in recent times, it's hard. It really is hard to make sense of what's going on. And I don't think that's any mistake. I think that's a deliberate tactic that's been forced upon the people right now. Because with all the information at our fingertips, be it about food and the body, be it about JFK, the paranormal, all of the stuff that's out there, Ryan, I was talking when we opened up the show about how things are changing. Even us, we're changing. Down to the actual cellular level, I suppose you could say, with CRISPR-9. But also the way we think is changing as well. And we've been talking lately about how humans now, in general, a study shows that we literally have an attention span less than the goldfish. So at this time, when everyone's on the internet and we've all got this information and knowledge and wisdom has been right within our grasp, we seem to be going backwards during this time of change.
Not only has the attention span dropped to that below of a goldfish, but I believe the number is somewhere around 14 IQ points on average have been decreased since the early 1900s. And I think a lot of that has to do indirectly, no conspiracy, with the proliferation of mechanical technology, where, yes, a computer, yes, a calculator is a very valuable device. But if you only grow up knowing how to use a calculator and you don't learn basic arithmetic, if you only grow up knowing how to use a microwave and you never learn how to boil water or cook for yourself, what happens when you remove the microwave and when you remove the calculator from the equation? Then you don't know how to do those very basic elements, and that removes, I think, an element out of what makes us human, and that's part of this so-called or quote-unquote evolutionary process that's turning us into something that we're really not organically. It's making us more synthetic. And then, of course, that's on a very, very low level. When you look at the elements that are done directly, the elements that are applied directly, then you start to find that it's not necessarily even a conspiracy per se, but it is an agenda for one reason or two reasons or 100 reasons to advance this transhumanist agenda forward in order to some people, gain better control of society through the accessing of information and the acquiring of every piece of information about the individual so that that person can be tracked, that person can be monitored. So it's for surveillance, it's for advertising purposes, but I think it's also to allow artificial intelligence, which I think has existed in many forms for quite a long time. It's not something that's necessarily new. And I looked at this thing called the Sentient World Simulation at Purdue University. A couple of universities have things like this. I think the NSA and the CIA probably run things like this as well. And it is a synthetic environment where they plug in information in real time from the real world, coming in from every source, and then they're able to map out patterns to determine how people will behave based on previous actions, which is why Amazon said they can ship you a package before you order it based on patterns, based on things you've done in the past. So all of that, whether it's advertising, whether it's surveillance, whether it's the boot of oppression, people that just want control, whether it's for political reasons, religious reasons, whatever the reason is, I think the truth, whatever the truth might be, that kernel of truth transcends all of that. And when we step back and we look at it objectively, we can see that regardless of what you think about technology, regardless of what you think about things like genetically modified foods, they are nevertheless, and at the very least, being forced on the population. And regardless of what people want to do, and regardless of what people want to act like, our lives are being dictated to us from one source or another. And the last thing I would say on that is going back to what you mentioned a moment ago, Kev, is that intelligence is the ability to acquire and apply knowledge. So it might be intelligent. You can say someone is intelligent to design a method by which to genetically alter seeds, like a CRISPR technology. It might be intelligent to build the hydrogen bomb or an atomic weapon, but is it wise to release genetically modified seeds? Is it wise to detonate an atomic bomb? And I think that's really at the root core of all of this. We can be intelligent, but just because we're intelligent doesn't mean we're wise.
Absolutely. The intelligence, you could say, is off the charts, but when it comes to that wisdom, i.e. pressing a button that could be 50-50 if it sets the atmosphere on fire or not, well, we can see that that's severely lacking. And I like what you said there about the synthetic environment. And this is very similar. In fact, it's probably the same system as what they call the Sentient World Simulation that was first put forward by Purdue University. And every single one of us right now, we talk about doppelgangers, but we literally have a digital doppelganger. And just like Ryan was saying there, all of our information via Facebook, via every keystroke we take on any electronic device, the microphones in our phones, other people's telephones, everything, grabbing data in every form that it can, all of that being fed live time into this digital reality. So we already exist here physically in the 3D world, and we have a digital doppelganger in this virtual reality. Now, I have to ask you, Ryan, because when I was talking about the future there, and we've mentioned the fact that our brains, the way we think, we seem to be going backwards. We've got CRISPR-9, where they're literally talking about being able to edit your own genome. Do you see this next age, this new age, as I suspect we're rapidly approaching? Is it going to be humanity 2.0, Are they going to upgrade us, i.e. chips, maybe merge us with the AI? And I see you're wanting in here as well, Jimmy. I'll put this to Ryan first, and you can jump in. Or do you think that we are, as somebody like Ray Kurzweil would say, just a stepping stone in the evolutionary ladder? And basically all we're here for is to create the machines that will go on beyond us. What way do you think it's going to go, Ryan?
Well, on the subject of Kurzweil in particular, Kurzweil said something that a lot of people interpret as a warning. And although there have been many transhumanists and so-called futurists who have issued warnings about artificial intelligence, I don't think what Ray Kurzweil said about AI was, or excuse me, Elon Musk, not Ray Kurzweil. Elon Musk said about AI was a warning. I think it was a statement. He said, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. And I think that is the intention. That is the goal. Whether Elon Musk and Ray Kurzweil and the others in Silicon Valley are aware of that and are consciously wanting to do so, or if they are part of something bigger that they don't understand fully. On the subject of Ray Kurzweil said by 2030, our thinking then will be a hybrid of biological and non-biological thinking. Nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent creatures. And I think to get at the at least from my perspective, the answer to your question, let's look at something simpler. Rather than nanotechnology, look at social media. Social media presents this overt method by which to connect us, suggesting that you can connect with friends and family and loved ones. You can connect with people maybe you knew in high school. You're not connected to them anymore. You want to see what they're doing, connect with them through Facebook. It's great. Well, the thing is, we're already connected to one another. If you've ever been in a loving relationship, if you've ever truly felt what love is with a family member, with maybe even a pet, you feel a connectivity that seems to transcend mainstream orthodox scientific understanding, where you can almost read the other person's mind. You can feel them like someone who maybe is considered an empath. And so on that basic level, we're already very much connected with each other. And I think if we were to progress forward in that evolutionary state, we would be able to transcend the mechanical technology. But what I think technology is becoming is a more efficient means of going backwards. And what we find is people promising us that if we connect ourselves to the machines, if we connect ourselves to the cloud and to the hive mind, that this will allow us to progress society forward, and that this is, as you suggested, the next stage in evolution. I don't think so. I think it is regression. I don't think that it is progression. I mean, it depends on how you define progression, too, because for someone who works in Silicon Valley, developing the next application, the next social media platform for spying, for surveillance, or something to feed information into a world simulation, or to feed AI so it learns and it grows and it adapts and it understands patterns and behavior and can determine our weaknesses. If you see that as progress, then yes, that is progress. But generally speaking, looking at humanity in terms of evolution, I think if we are looking into connecting ourselves to a computer system in order so that we may, as some suggest, live forever, or live, as you mentioned coming into the show, live for 1,000 years. My question is this: what is the point in living 1,000 years if you have no purpose in life? What is the point for the people that say you only live once? And they say that in relation to drinking themselves to death or partying themselves to death and always burning the candle at both ends, per se. Not that those things are necessarily bad, but if you only live once and you only get to experience this world one time, do you remember what it was like before you were born? Most people don't. I think a majority of people don't. So if this is your only experience, I think that we should take care of our bodies. I think that we should take care of ourselves. We should learn. We should grow. We should take care of our vehicle like we would if we had a car or we had a home. And so in that respect, I think it's very, very important to recognize that all of the things that technology and all of the things that the technology companies and all of the things that the Kurzweils and the Musks promise us are things that we already have, things that we already are. They're promising us a synthetic version of it. Not that technology can't be beneficial, but there's a degree for which it is reached where it goes overboard. And when we are overwhelmed with that, we no longer control the technology. The technology controls us. We put Skynet in control. And I think
absolutely. We're almost on the break, and you know what Ryan was talking about there, that organic hive mind that we do have, these entanglements, as we call it here on the show. You know, they want to create the artificial kind of alternative to that. They want to give us their hive mind, and we'll come back on the other side. We'll get into more of this. This has been brilliant already, and we're only one segment in with Ryan Gable. Please visit his website at thesecretteachings.info. We will be back after the break. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
There we go. Just like that, we were back. I'm Kev Baker, and this is the first Kev Baker Show of the week right here on Truth Frequency Radio, where silence is consent. Big shout out to everyone in the chat room tonight, and big shout out to everyone who's tuned in live. I see my good friend Nancy in there. Big shout out to you, Nancy. And perhaps later on, after the show, not too sure, but I may be practicing some gaming truth tonight. That's right, with everything going on at YouTube, I need to think of different ways to get the information out there. So perhaps me talking about all these kind of topics while I'm playing some of my favorite games might be one way I can trick the algorithm. So please keep your eye open on social media for any links if I do go live. But tonight we are live with Ryan Gable of thesecretteachings.info. And I've also got Jimmy Jeans here with me. Now, Jimmy, during the break, we were having a bit of a laugh there because all three of us, very big admirers and friends of Clyde Lewis, Ground Zero. And I was kind of pulling Ryan's leg, telling him that, you know, you're no Ron Patton, Jimmy. I need to get myself a good producer here, man. You can't even get the mute button off, dude.
Oh, please, man. Please. Well, let's just say I may not be Ron Patton, but I am definitely Jimmy Jean. And I am not Mr. Right, but Mr. Right Now. So being Mr. Right Now, Kev, I kind of wanted to circle back around because I think we touched on a lot of subjects in the last half hour. And one of the things is that, you know, I think that the transhumanism began a long time ago. And I think that we've been softened into the psychology of the internet. And I think at this point, the reality that we have is a split reality between a physical reality that we all live in every day and feel and see our, you know, pets and our children and all that. And then we have the secondary reality, which is the one that's on the internet. And that one has been completely profiled, and which is part of the reason why there's synchronicity, I think, in Clyde's show, you know, and some of the stuff that we talk about is because we're into that same profiled group and we get fed the same information in our searches that, you know, is available to the same people that are looking at the information that we're looking at. I think there's a whole psychology that's developed now that we're not even aware of. And I don't think anyone's even done research on it to even have a handle on it, because there's a generation of children that have grown up with two distinct realities. And the one that we call virtual isn't necessarily virtual to them, because the way when I grew up, I was sat down in front of the TV, you know, while my parents were doing something. But today you have children learning how to work iPhones and being able to search the internet and find out about topics, whatever they may be, however they may fit into the structure. But the bottom line is we are all Pavlov's dog on the internet. We salivate when we're told to. We click. We get excited. We make comments. And there's a psychology developed by these corporations that understand how all this works, and they've integrated this system to soften us. The hardware is one aspect of it, but honestly, I think realistically, what we should be looking at is the software and how we've been restructured to sort of have this plastic self on the internet that can be shaped and molded by whatever the psychology of the day is, whatever the subject matter today that we need to be upset about. feeding our need for seductive characters and seductive information to pull us into a group that gets basically run around like a shepherd and a flock of sheep. I think hyperreality too is another thing. The postmodernism. I started looking at postmodernism about a month ago, and there's a big term that's in there, and it's called hyperreality. And we brought this up on the show about a week or two ago, I think. And let me just read this real quick. Hyperreality is the inability of consciousness to distinguish reality from simulation of reality, especially in technologically advanced postmodern societies. Hyperreality is seen as a condition in which what is real and what is fiction are seamlessly blended together so that there is no clear distinction between where one ends and where the other begins. It allows the commingling of a physical reality with virtual reality and human intelligence with artificial intelligence. Individuals may find themselves, for different reasons, more in tune and involved with one hyper-real world and less on the physical real world. Yeah?
Wow. Well, that really is kind of so descriptive of the times that we live in now, Ryan. And, I was wondering your take on just how much of our behavior has been influenced by social media and these tech companies. Like Jimmy says, away from the actual devices, but into the actual programs themselves. And we've seen the Facebook executives all coming out and admitting that they used psychological techniques to basically hook us in, like drug addicts. And it's almost as if we'll use Facebook as an example, but it's almost as if that one website, it's changing society, it's changing the way we think, but it's acting as a very, very good medium to absorb us and integrate us into this hyper reality before moving into a total virtual one, perhaps.
Yeah, that was a really, really good set of points there, Jimmy. I completely agree. And when you look at something like Facebook or social media, as we were talking about in the last segment, social media has been used, as you also just said, social media has been used. And we heard what Sean Parker, one of the original founders in Facebook or investors of Facebook and the Napster founder, he said that Facebook exploits human psychology, which it absolutely does. It exploits this desire and this need, this inherent need to be connected to other people, something, again, we were talking about in the last segment. We are connected to other people. We feel connections. When you get really close to somebody, it's almost as if you can determine what they're thinking. You know what they're thinking. And it's not because you're thinking it. It's a feeling. It's an emotion. And that comes from the heart. That comes from wisdom as opposed to the head, as opposed to the brain, the decoding system, the CPU of the mechanical body, and the knowledge, the intelligence that we think makes us so great as a species collectively. If you look at something like Google, you look at Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the official founders of Google. Google was founded with money from the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, and the Digital Library Initiative, which includes NASA, the National Science Foundation, and DARPA, which is the Department of Defense that works with Boston Dynamics and other companies to build killer robots.
And Ryan, if anyone's kind of a bit skeptical about what you're saying there, Sergey Brin, in one of his papers that he wrote at MIT, when, like you say, bang on, he was working with seed money from the military-industrial complex. Mm-hmm. He literally, in his own paper, and it was to do with, it was a really quirky kind of title about what you would do with a World Wide Web in your pocket or something. And he actually took time to thank the alphabet agencies, the DARPAs out there, for being the ones to give him the funding to go and do this research in the first place.
That's right.
And this is what became Google now. And that friendly search engine, do no evil. What are they doing playing about with genetics? Stuff like that. People just aren't looking at the bigger picture here.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. If you do a little bit of research into Google, not only were they founded with seed money from the CIA, the NSA, DARPA, the DOD, Department of Defense, but they've also broken the company down into holding companies. They have Alphabet, which I thought was interesting because Alphabet's headquarters is in Google, and we call the NSA, the CIA, we call them Alphabet agencies, and they were the funders of Google initially. But there's a company called Ancestry DNA. I know you've probably heard of that.
Oh, yes.
And 23andMe. Ancestry DNA is a sub-company of the company Ancestry, and it's located right in the same area in Utah as the NSA Global Database Center is. 23andMe, another very similar company, is located in Silicon Valley. Now get this, the CEO of 23andMe is the ex-wife of Sergey Brin, and the CEO of YouTube is the sister of the CEO of 23andMe. And the chairman of Apple, Arthur Levinson, is the head of a biotech company called Calico, dealing with genetics, and that company was founded by Google. So when you start to look at all of these different elements, I did a show on this, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, and I looked at how Google, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Amazon, Apple, all of these companies collectively are a Trojan horse. If you've seen, I think it was the fifth Terminator film, there's a scene at the end where they keep repeating this line throughout the movie, but at the very end they say, remember, Genesis is Skynet. Genesis was this all-encompassing smart technology that connected everything to a grid. They say Genesis is Skynet. Genesis is Skynet. Well, I think we can apply these companies and our current state of affairs to that same type of concept. I think Amazon, YouTube, Facebook, Google, I think that is Skynet. I think that is the Internet of Things that will be turned into and turned over to, with all of the data and all of the information that helps the AI to grow, to this AI system. And I don't think it's really so outlandish to suggest that much of what we see within social media, going back to your question, much of what we see within the world that we live is all based on the types of propaganda and social engineering, going back to Edward Bernays. And you see how we watch television, we listen to music, and most of the people that do these things, and this includes myself, I could be out somewhere at a store and I hear a song. I don't like the artist. I don't know who the artist is half of the time. I don't understand what they're saying, and it gets stuck in my head, Kev. So I start singing it. I start humming it, like subconsciously. It's that powerful. And I think if we look at things in that way, just taking a step backwards and objectively looking at it, we know that there are audio and obviously images that are subliminal, that are placed in commercials. There's guerrilla advertising. All of these things play on the subconscious. All of these things are symbols, which is why companies, that whether they're fast food companies or they're banks, they use certain symbols like the sun, like the pyramid, certain words that have power when we give our energy and attention to them. That is what magic is. Magic is symbolic action. And so we see a symbol like the sun. It's a powerful symbol. It communicates to us on the subconscious. And then we give our attention to it, and we see that company that uses that symbol as a powerful company, as an authority, let's say, on something. I'll give you one last example, and I'll shut up. I read this thing one time that Starbucks was, of all companies in the world, the one company that no matter how many times someone tries to either boycott or they no longer want to support Starbucks, that company, more than any other company, all the people that try to get away from Starbucks, they end up coming right back to it. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to read, because the symbol of Starbucks is Melusine, the water goddess. The symbol of Starbucks is a siren. The siren sounds from myth that lure men to their demise. Literally, people drawn to Starbucks. Like
I tell you, it seduces me in the door every day of the week. If I could, I'm one of these people that keep getting drawn back to Ryan, and I'll get criticism for it out there. I know that, but it just shows you it's an example of the power, even subconsciously, that these symbols do have on us. And you know, thinking about what you said there, the Skynet scenario, and it got me thinking, and are we looking at some kind of chicken or the egg scenario? Because what came first? And I say that because working with Anthony Patch, we're able to take things from the ancient past, all the way back in the times of Babylon and the Tower of Babel, through to John Dee and the magic that he was working, all of the demonic kind of entities he was trying to contact, through to Crowley and his magic as well. And we can see parallels in the technology today. So I have to ask myself, was it the technology that led to the artificial intelligence being able to take advantage of all of this, Ryan? Or has there been an artificial intelligence all across the ages that has been prompting and poking and steering and directing certain individuals throughout time to lead us to where we are today, building out the system that is absolutely tailor-made for an artificial intelligence? So what came first?
That's a terrific question, and I think about that often myself, Kev. I want to read you a quotation from Peter Diamandis, the co-founder of the Singularity University with Ray Kurzweil. Peter said, quote, "Anybody who is going to be resisting the progress forward is going to be resisting evolution, and fundamentally they will die out. It's not a matter of whether it's good or bad. It's going to happen," end quote. Now, just listening to what someone like Peter says in Silicon Valley, friends with Ray Kurzweil, co-founder of the Singularity University, that sounds very similar to Star Trek, doesn't it? It sounds very similar to the Borg. We are Borg. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile. And that's what we keep being told by the tech companies. That's what we're told by the telecommunications industry. That's what we're told by Silicon Valley. We're told that this is going to happen whether you like it or not. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a professor at MIT that said a couple of months ago that they keep developing this AI, and no matter what they have developed, the various elements of it, they don't fully understand what they've created. Which, to me, if I was doing something I didn't understand and it was potentially threatening to my life and perhaps billions of other people's lives, I would stop doing it. But
well, you see, this is the one aspect that really worries me about AI, Ryan, and it's a real and present danger. And I know you want to jump in, Jimmy, but they call it the black box problem. And the way that these neural networks play, shall we say, and the kind of deep nets, the machine learning, as they call it, one thing about that is that you don't ever get to see the process of how it actually arrives at one outcome over another. There's no way to take a look at the actual decision-making process that is going on within the neural net. And that's why I've always said, despite the fact I'm a geek and I can see so many advantages if we work with artificial intelligence as opposed to working for it, it's this black box problem, Jimmy. And it's like Ryan said earlier on, it's like the wisdom thing. We're creating this super technology, but is it really wise to unleash it on the masses out of control? And you just know they'll press the button come the day, Jimmy, and that's not been fearful. But if we look historically, that's what they've done anytime we've reached one of these kind of precipices in history.
I know a lot from me. I know a lot about in my life the way that I've reached wisdom in subject matter is to be on the ground and make mistakes and learn what it means to make a mistake, and then learn what I have not to do, in my action. And I think in a lot of these technological things that are going on here, there is no actual experience. And so they only have concepts until they actually push the button. And then when the button gets pushed, at that point, we see the ramifications of our actions. And because there really, technology is taking on a course of its own. There is no governing body deciding what technology gets invented and what doesn't. And then once something is invented, there's no one sitting over it to see how it's going to affect humanity overall. So we're in a place of innovation. We're in a place where we're evolving in a stair-step manner, just like has happened in antiquity, where we went along for a certain period of time and then we made giant jumps out of nowhere. And I think that's what's happening now. And I think a lot of what happens is not necessarily sinister by design, but the result of pushing that button ends up having sinister effects, just like Back in the day, in the early, I think it was in the 40s or 50s, they had a big outbreak of mosquitoes on the East Coast, and they basically went down the beach and sprayed everybody with DMT to the point that the children were literally covered with white powder. Now, I don't think they were purposely trying to damage those children, but just at the time they didn't realize what DMT was, or well, I'm saying DMT, what they didn't realize what was going to happen as a result of using those pesticides.
No, I get you, man. And, that's why I'm always keen to point out that I don't hold all of these scientists. I don't think they're getting together in some dark dungeon somewhere, planning our demise. I think they're the brightest, most genius-like minds out there. But like you say, they rarely know which way their technology is going to fall. And I'll come back to you, Ryan, because you've looked at the kind of the ancient times, the occult, stuff like that. And I mentioned John Dee earlier on there. And when you look into John Dee, you come across the story of the Golem and how he created these basically, these vehicles, these hosts for, in terms to what we're talking about here, you would say demonic entities, right? Now, here we are today. We've got a company called Sanctuary AI. It's a subsidiary of D-Wave, which is very, very integrated into all of the companies, the Facebooks, the Amazons that we spoke about earlier, the Skynet system. And this is one of their subsidiaries, one of three. And what they're doing is, in their own words, and I've played the clips on the show before, Dr. Suzanne Gildert says they are bringing Westworld to life. And we're looking at synthetic life forms. And they say that within 10 years or so, they're going to be indistinguishable from humans, literally biological cyborgs. Now, my question to you is, and of course we're speculating here, Ryan, is whether these are going to be hosts, much like we've seen with the Golem, or going back further to the homunculus, stuff like that, for some kind of entity to come in and indwell.
Another really, really good question, Kev. I want to say one other thing about the last question you asked me, and then I'll touch on this question. And that is when you use fire, or when you use a hammer, or when you use any type of power tool, these things can be used for beneficial purposes, for cooking food, for building a house, but you can also burn somebody with the fire. The fire isn't intending to burn you. It is just a byproduct of its nature, and you can use it for cooking, or you can use it for burning something that you want to get rid of. And I think on the subject that Jimmy brought up, that's a really great point, because technology is not necessarily bad. Technology can be used for very beneficial purposes, but when it is used by people who have bad intentions, who have a lack of moral direction, who are ignorant, who are arrogant, who are not balanced, then technology can be used for very, very horrific things. And we've seen that, of course, throughout history. Now, on the subject of magic in relation to technology and the possibility that these things are being developed as vessels for something to come in, when you look at what magic is, people define magic differently, but the basic description of magic, from my understanding, all of my occult research, is that magic is intention. Magic is perception. And that's why the stage magician misdirects. Look at the left hand, not at the right hand. Look at the right hand, not at the left hand. White magic is the intention to help other people. To help yourself and not to bring harm to others is what is called gray magic. And to intend to harm others is called black magic. Now, you can still harm somebody inadvertently, indirectly, through using other forms of magic, but it is the intention of the type of magic that you use that determines whether or not it's white, gray, or black. Now, in understanding that, just as a very, very basic concept, and applying the stage magic to technology, we look at misdirection, and I think so much of what we see is a misdirection away from, and that's how it's marketed. That's how it's sold to the public. It's a misdirection. We are misdirected. We are misinformed about the possible dangers of these technological advancements in the hands of the military-industrial complex, defense contractors, and just outright psychopaths who might want to cause harm. And because we have our attention misdirected and we don't look at those other details, we're not addressing that as a collective, and we're allowing people who just want to advance forward to get more funding, to build a better bomb, to build a better war machine, to build something bigger and badder that's going to kill more people because that's where the money is. That's where quote unquote success is. So all of those things in relation to what Jimmy said as well, that's very important to understand. It's not that we're looking at one grand conspiracy. We're not looking at one grand evil entity trying to take over. But when you look at companies and you look at private enterprises and you look at like Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, for example, did the same thing. They funded these studies into determining whether or not we live in a matrix, and if we live in a computer simulation. And I've speculated that possibly the reason that might be is because whatever this entity is, and I've speculated with Clyde Lewis, we've done this many times on his show and my show, that there is an outside entity. There is an outside, kind of like a parasite like you'd see in Stranger Things. And this parasite is feeding off of the suffering and the pain. It's feeding off of us. It needs us to survive, kind of like the monsters in Monsters, Inc. They come into our world, they feed off the fear. And so perhaps they operate through the Kurzweils and the Musks. They operate through the technological companies. And they feed this information into the human consciousness so that we build this system. And so when we read these numerous reports, whether it's from a billionaire, it's from a bank, or it's from some tech company that say, we already live in a matrix, we already live in a simulation, whether it's because that's coming from outside our reality or it's part of a psychological warfare program, either way, we start to think, oh, we're already living in a matrix. Oh, we're already living in a computer simulation. So I might as well not fight it. We're already living in one. Everything seems fine. Why not allow the technology to advance? And if that includes building machines that will be used for the summoning of the demon, literally or figuratively, like Elon Musk said, then so be it. We already live in that world. What's it going to harm, Kev?
Oh, Ryan Gable, just drop that mic and exit stage left. Absolutely brilliant. We'll be back with hour number 2 after the break. And you all know that the simulation theory is something that I love to talk about. We'll get Jimmy and Ryan more thoughts on this and a whole lot more after this.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Hour number 2 on tonight's Kev Baker Show, right here on TFRlive.com. And don't forget, coming up after tonight's show, we'll have Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew, and they'll be live with Quantum Connections. But we've still got one more hour with this brand new guest, and I'm hoping he's going to agree to come back time and time again. Ryan Gable from the secretteachings.info. He's also got a podcast of the same name. And Ryan, before I get Jimmy's thoughts on the simulation theory, where can people get a hold of your book, man?
They can find my book, Occult Arcana, and my radio broadcast, which is live Monday through Friday exclusively on the Fringe FM. They can find links to listen. They can find the book and everything else they might need or want to know about the broadcast. It's all at www.thesecretteachings.info. There's a couple of links at the top of the page, pretty self-explanatory. Or you can email me at rdgable@yahoo.com. I deal with all of the subscriptions, all of the books, directly through me.
Awesome stuff, and I urge everyone to check that out. Now, Jimmy, I'm coming back to you, because simulation theory, we're no stranger to this kind of talk. And listening to Ryan there, it was a brilliant description of something that I share a view of. You know, I do feel that in some way, whether we describe it as a simulation or some other term we come up with, it's almost as if there is this external force, and very parasitic. Now, I've been a long-time reader and listener to David Icke, all of his material. I picture that this entity, these entities that are just outside of our vision of view, as reptilian. But whether they're reptilian, whether they're grey aliens, whether they're shaped like the Wookiee itself, it's irrelevant, really, and everyone's belief system will shape the way that they see this. But I certainly think that there is something to this external force that relies on us, it feeds on us. And doesn't this very much tie into the conversation that we had the other night, where I asked you what is deemed a controversial question in conspiracy circles, and that was, are we really getting too scared over this 500 million number on the Georgia Guidestones? Are we being misdirected again? Because as we are hearing here, there's something that really does rely on feeding upon us. Away from the elites taxing us, Jimmy, something bigger going on.
Well, I think, from a sociological perspective, I think you see, I want to bring up the concept of money. Now, money, I get a paycheck at the end of the week for some money. And because I put a bunch of energy in during the week at my job, and that is stored up, and then the currency is handed back to me at the end of the week. So what I've done is I've taken my labor, I've turned it into energy, I've made something happen for my employer, and at the end of the week, all that stored up energy that I delivered to him is delivered back to me in the form of currency. And I think when you're talking about you're talking about this simulation, I think it's important to take the metaphor of the movie The Matrix itself and think about the egg and think about the person in the egg being fed nutrients so that it could keep providing the energy back to the machine. Now, what I want to bring to the table now is to make people understand that the clicking of links or whatever it is you click on the internet is energy. And every time we click, we send a spark of energy to the machine, and we feed this machine the energy. And that machine is getting energy, and that's being stored up, and it's being paid back in dollars and cents. And those dollars and cents are being used to buy up the biggest and best brains across the planet to develop technology to move us into the new world. Now, whether that's going to be a boot on the neck of humanity for eternity or not is up to us, because ultimately we are creating the simulation by what we're doing on the internet. So if we are going to feed the negative beast and lay down and bow to the beast of negativity and bring the reality to the fore with what we think, what we say, and what we do, I think we have a responsibility to try to create a reality that looks different. It doesn't have to look like the one being rammed down our throat. Revelation, it's not necessarily a prophecy, but I can tell you this, it's definitely a business plan, and there's a lot of money to be made off the negativity. And so I think the simulation we should move out of is that one and move into the simulation that is going to provide us what we need for the future.
That's definitely the way we should be going. And then at the same time as that's going on, Jimmy, and you're bang on, we have people like Musk and others out there who want to take us further and deeper and integrate us more into this artificial matrix that they're building all around us. We've got the neural lace, stuff like that. So, Ryan, I'll ask your thoughts on what Jimmy said there, and whether you really do see us, sometime in the near future being integrated into this artificial one via technology, nanobots, neural laces, or do you have a more optimistic outlook and we return more to the organic system that we really do crave and we need to get back to, more akin to what Jimmy was talking about there?
Well, like Jimmy was talking about, the energy that we expend in order to obtain some money, in order to obtain that currency, that's something I've spoke about on my broadcast, and I've had Jordan Maxwell on many times. He gets into all of the details of word magic and the language we use. When we manifest things through our energy, through our attention, the saying that energy flows where attention goes, we can bring about things that otherwise might not be real in the traditional sense. And so let me give you a really quick example of this that I think connects with artificial intelligence, simulation theory. Just like earlier, you said that food is really no different than JFK. Everything connects together. I went to see the Slender Man movie a couple of months ago, actually, I think at this point now. And Slender Man was only an internet meme. Slender Man has developed into a symbol of horror on the internet. It's turned into a variety of stories. Little girls tried to murder their friend for this internet character. Now it's been made into a movie. And in that movie, Clyde Lewis and I talked about this. We did a huge show on this, and I even did a show called Slender Man is Him, H-I-M. That was back on August 13th. It's in my archives at thesecretteachings.info. And what I found is in the Slender Man movie, the girls referred to Slender Man as him, but they spelled the name capital H-I-M. And I remember listening to a Lady Gaga song once where she starts the song out. It's called Born This Way. And she says, it doesn't matter if you love him or capital H-I-M. And the way that she says it, her voice kind of crackles and becomes distorted. And that reminded me of an old cartoon in the 1990s where there was a character called it was basically a devil. He was the devil, but his name was him. And this character spoke in that same crackly voice. And that same crackly voice is also given to a weird pyramid with an eyeball, an all-seeing eye, in another Disney Channel show called Gravity Falls. And that character is a demon that turns people against each other, turns brother against sister, sister against brother, and steals the souls of these children. And when you start to look at, as I did, and Clyde and I did, like I said, a big show on this, you start to find a similarity between all of these different characters that represent the devil, that represent these external forces that come into our reality, if you will, and they manifest through entertainment. Because where energy flows, attention goes. Because our attention is focused on entertainment, entertainment is a prime place to put this information. And so we watch it. We watch it late at night. We watch it in the middle of the day. We listen to it while we're at work. All of that feeds into the subconscious. And as it feeds into the subconscious, millions and millions and millions and millions of bits of data. Our reality is only made up by a few dozen. The rest of that gets dumped into the subconscious. And so we build this subconscious reality. And in building that subconscious reality, most of us not fully consciously aware of what's being built, we begin to manifest these things. And so they show up everywhere. They show up in movies and music, and they show up in television. They show up in cartoons and games and books. And have you ever seen the movie Monsters Incorporated, Kev?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, my son used to love that one.
What is that movie? That movie is a movie about monsters who come in with portals, come into our world, and they target children, they scare them, they bottle the fear, and they use the fear to power their world. And when I started thinking about that and putting all of this information together for this one particular show called Slender Man is Him, I looked at the main character who was the guy that runs the power plant in the Monsters Incorporated movie, and he's like this crab creature. And this crab creature is very similar to what I was shown by a man named Harold Kautz from Germany, a scientist who has studied something called black goo. And he showed that inside of the bodies of people that suffer from Morgellons, they've done remote viewings of this, believe it or not, and the characters that they painted from these remote viewings are little characters that look like spiders. They look like the monster from Monsters, Inc. And that monster from Monsters, Inc. that runs the power plant, he's a parasite. They're feeding off of our world. And that's the same thing that we find in Stranger Things. So you start to see these connections, and some of them, like Slender Man, are very, very simple and are very unknown. And then they manifest and become part of our reality. And so in answering your question, I think, as Jimmy said, and as you suggested in the latter part of your question, there is a way to change this. There is a way to make our reality a better situation for all of us. And I don't think we do that through voting and through protesting and through yelling and through screaming and through fighting and arguing with each other, kind of like David Icke. I know who you're a fan of, and I am as well. David Icke talks about the feedback loop. And when you are angry, when you're fearful, this creates a feedback loop. And the people that you're afraid of, the people that you're angry with, they're angry at you, they're afraid of you, and it just creates this loop that goes on and on and on. We have to disconnect from that. And so I'll take us all the way back to the beginning of the show when I started talking about food. And I said that I think food is the number one thing for most of us, not everybody, but for most of us, the number one thing that we can do to change our reality, to change our world. If we take control of what we eat, what goes into our body, we can also take control of what we watch, television, movies, what we listen to, music, what we read, books, magazines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And by doing that, we can cut out a huge portion of that information that gets dumped into the subconscious, and we can consciously take our actions, take action rather. We can consistently and constantly take action to better ourselves and to advance ourselves forward so that we grow and that we learn and that we love and that we laugh. And I think that as an individual creates the greatest change in the world around us. And when we do that and show other people that it's possible, then other people, in my experience, start to do the exact same thing. And I think that is what saves us. That is what prevents us from being assimilated. And on the subject of things like AI and Skynet and this being an inevitability, I like the line from the end of the third Terminator, that they were not supposed to stop Judgment Day. They were supposed to survive it. You can postpone it, but you can't stop it. You can only postpone it. You can survive it. And I think that's what we can do. All of this, I think, is going to progress forward, regardless of what we do as individuals or as a collective. All of the technological, quote-unquote, progress. But to answer your question, Kev, very simply, as that progresses forward, we can disconnect from that. We can take a step back. We can break that feedback loop. We can postpone that Judgment Day. But all we're meant to do is survive it. And if we disconnect from it, we can survive it and not play into it and make it stronger.
Absolutely. Entertainment, media in general. I think that's why you can look back in time. And I'm not talking ages. I'm just talking maybe 60, 70 years before we had all this mass media launched upon us. You often hear people saying, times were simpler back then. Everyone was more happy. And they literally were, because they weren't being bombarded in this way. And Jimmy, what he was saying there about the Slender Man, absolutely amazing. I'm going to have to check out that podcast. But it made me think of grey aliens as well, because this is something I've thought about in the past, and it's along similar lines to what Ryan is saying there. And we often talk about intent, Jimmy. And how many times have we been showing these little grey aliens with the big eyes? And then just by miracle, when you get people saying that they've had sightings and they've been abducted, just so happens they appear just like they do in the movies. Little grey aliens with big black eyes. So are we being programmed to think that? Or are we bringing them about ourselves? And I know you want to add to this, because this is the kind of stuff you talk about all the time.
I know. What a great discussion. That's what I love about coming in here to the Kev Baker Show and sitting down at this round table, because the kind of cogent discussion that goes on here is something that I think I really benefit from as a person, and I'm hoping that the listeners benefit from it too. And I think, part of what goes on with technology is we're sort of drugged into this unconscious reactive behavior based on emotional response. And I think one of the best things that we can do is become a conscious creator, because really the only thing that any of us can do about any of this is we can't stop what's going on, but what we can do, and the only way we can change the world, is if we change ourselves. And I learned a fact yesterday that blew my mind. That was 90% of the corn that's grown in the world is grown by corporations now. And part of what you guys are talking about with the food, these are conscious choices that you can make for yourself to make your own life better. No one's going to make our lives better for us. There is no savior outside of ourselves to come and save us from ourselves. We have to save ourselves. And I think consciousness is not an attainment at the top of the mountain. It's a day-to-day exercise where we're conscious about what we say, what we do, how we react, the kind of energy we put forward to the people we come in contact with, because we're being led around by the nose by emotional response, seductive characters. We've been forced onto the plantation, and we're in informational chutes. We're being fed information every single day that causes us to act and react. And that's the thing, is we need to stop reacting and start making conscious choices about what we're going to do. When we have the information to make those clear choices, I think the reality that we create will be much better. But I love the conversation. Ryan, thanks a lot for stopping by to Kev Baker Show today, man. What a great conversation.
Oh, this is brilliant. I think Clyde Lewis will be kicking himself. I think he would like to be here for this one. But, myself and Ryan, we're having a back and forth in the chat here as well. And it is, when we said before the show how all three of us here, we far prefer to work more organically. We just see where the conversation goes as opposed to scripting things out. And listening to Ryan, listening to Jimmy, and, I'm going to put it to Ryan here, these black-eyed children, and I've spoke about them umpteen times on the show. The whole subject fascinates me, Ryan, and I'm not naive. I know a high percentage of the reports that they may be actually fictional. However, I think it's based in some reality. And I want to get your thoughts on the Black-Eyed Kids. It's something we're bringing about, much like the Slender Man. And I even see you relating it to something else I've spoke about on the show, the black goo. I mean, how much evidence do we have? And I've heard Harold speaking before, and I love the black goo, and I'm not criticizing it, but have we ever really seen this stuff? Have we worked with it? Do we have any evidence that it exists, Ryan? And if so, how much of an influence is it playing on society, humanity, everything today?
That's a big question, Kev, but I'll try my best to answer.
I like the big questions. I ask about 4 or 5 in one go just to give the guest plenty of ammunition. There you go, man. Take it away.
I do the same thing on my show, too. I've talked to Harold Counts 3 times on my show, The Secret Teachings. He says that he's seen the black goo physically, and he says that there are 2 kinds of it. There's one that's more organic, that's from Earth, kind of like an oil, the blood of the Earth, and another one that is more synthetic that comes from somewhere else. Now, I don't really argue one way or another whether or not the black goo in a literal sense exists or if it doesn't exist. To me, that's not really my concern. My observations follow entertainment specifically, and in entertainment, from movies and television to the music industry, we find such a prolific amount of this black goo in all types of different forms that it is undeniable that there is some conscious intention to incorporate it into these various forms of entertainment. And I'll give you a couple of examples, but there are literally hundreds of examples.
This is good, man. This is good because, for some reason in recent times, and it's not that I doubt the black goo. It's just I've become a lot more, driven by, some evidence to base it on, Ryan. But when you talk there about the fact, when you mentioned there the fact that it is covered so widely, and I've done shows on this in the past about how it turns up in so many different films, TV shows. One that springs to mind, Helix, even the cover of that show, it's black goo flying everywhere. Yes. That in itself is a big indication that, that without the evidence of the goo itself, like you say, and it's brilliant how you put that, there's definitely an avenue that we need to research here just because they're bombarding us with it.
Absolutely, Kev. Very well said. There is one piece of evidence for this black goo that is not just a passing scene in a movie. And it comes from the same musical mastermind who said, it doesn't matter if you believe in him or capital H-I-M, relating to this Slender Man that I mentioned earlier. And by the way, H-I-M stands for His Infernal Majesty. They're talking about this satanic influence, in my opinion. Clyde and I figured that out while we were on Ground Zero one night. So there is a music video, and there is a TV commercial selling a perfume, and this perfume is called Fame, and it's by Lady Gaga. In the commercial, it's about 8 minutes long, and I've always said that there are only a few things that have ever really freaked me out doing radio, and this is one of those 3 things that have freaked me out. The first thing that freaks me out is the story of Dyatlov Pass. The second thing that freaks me out and has always given me kind of weird feelings when I'm doing a show or when I'm thinking about it are the missing children in the national forests. And the third thing is this Lady Gaga video called Fame. It's about 8 or 9 minutes long. Some of the cuts are shorter, some of them are longer. And it depicts this transformation of Lady Gaga. She's known as the Monster, which is a name that's also given to Slim Shady or Eminem, who comes in many forms. Slim Shady, Eminem, Marshall Mathers, multiple personalities. Slim Shady is, as he said in his own music, all Slim Shady is a bottle of hair bleach and vodka. He dyes his hair blonde, short blonde hair, just like Miley Cyrus, just like Britney Spears, just like Amanda Bynes, just like Kanye West, just like the little girl who dances in the SIA or the CIA, the Sia music videos, just like Katy Perry in the Bon Appetit video where her body is cooked in a very similar imagery that we find in Marina Abramovic spirit cooking art. And all of this is very well documented. You can see it. And what this has to do with black goo is in this Lady Gaga video, she's got blonde hair, and she starts off, she has black leather, she has more of a human look to her. And as the video progresses, she is consumed, she is overwhelmed, and literally falls into a tub of black goo. And as she falls into the tub of black goo, she pulls a gun out, fires the gun, and in another scene, shoots herself. She kills herself, like the imagery we've seen with people like Lindsay Lohan, the killing of one personality and the creation of another personality, which is another similar form of symbolism that we see all throughout the music industry. In fact, Taylor Swift just did a video that's and a song that's all over the airwaves where she says, "I'm sorry, the real Taylor Swift can't come to the phone right now. Why? She's dead." And then they put her into a grave. So getting to the specific points, I know I tend to rant and I tend to ramble on, Kev. I'm sorry about that. But
oh, no, that's very welcome here. This is brilliant, man.
I appreciate that. You look at the black goo in this music video, or excuse me, there is a music video with Lady Gaga. It's called Bad Romance, where she's wearing a black crown. But you look at it in this Fame video, and she also has on, again, the black crown. And so symbolically, she's lowered into this black goo. She's taken over by the black goo, and she comes out of the black goo with black leather, the same kind of black leather that Darth Vader wears in Star Wars. Darth Vader is the Dark Father. The Dark Father is the Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is Saturn. So these are very Saturnistic qualities here that also relates to the work of David Icke. And when you start to expand this information outward and you start to look at movies and TV shows that has this incorporated, you said Helix. That's a great example. Another one would be the X-Files. The alien virus, one of them is a black oil substance, and you can see it in the eyes. You can also see the black oil substance in the movie Prometheus, and that oil is used as an evolutionary push forward for humanity. The AI, the android David, puts the black goo into the drink. The human drinks the drink and turns into this creature. And so you see this transformation, kind of like an alchemical transformation, but it's more of a degrading of the body. And that leads in the Alien series to the creation of the Xenomorph, the black alien as we know it. And of course, in that movie also, in Alien, you have the face hugger, which is kind of like a parasite, like we were talking about earlier, like Stranger Things. And it is a parasite. It attaches to the face, uses the body. Now, this black goo can also be found in movies like Event Horizon. And it's a very similar imagery. It's a very similar form of symbolism. In Event Horizon, this ship called the Event Horizon, it goes missing. And when people are sent out to find it, they find that the crew is gone, but the ship is still there. And they find out what happened on this ship, not to give any spoilers, but when they activated this new kind of like a warp drive, this new engine, it opened up a portal to hell, and it drew people in. They started killing themselves. It created this degenerate atmosphere, and the portal was black goo, just like the one in the Fame video.
And we'll be back on the other side, folks. Ryan Gable, thesecretteachings.info. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after these messages. Oh man, what a show this has been tonight. Brilliant stuff. We'll be right back.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Ryan Gable is our special guest tonight right here on the Kev Baker Show. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in tonight. Please remember, check out Ryan's work and his podcast over at thesecretteachings.info. Now, before we launch back into this, and I really wish we had 3 or 4 hours tonight, the conversation, it's just so fascinating. But let me remind you, and it's synchronicity at work again, because this show was meant to take place last week. But now it's the perfect addition, follow-on from tonight's show. And that's tomorrow night, right here on the network. I'm very proud to welcome on to the Kev Baker Show Chris and Cherie Geo. And we'll be getting into their mission over in Egypt, where they were resetting the Matrix. And they talk about this artificial intelligence that's out there as well. And it's really, really going to be interesting to see how these two shows fit and flow together, because I honestly think they will. In tonight's show with Ryan, I entitled Homo Technicus, the kind of next stage in our evolution, albeit a technological forced one, or maybe an organic one, into a better and brighter future. Now, we've discussed various topics on the show, and we got into simulation theory and the potential for something on the outside of this matrix, for lack of a better term, feeding upon the matrix itself, and more importantly, more specifically, all of us within it. All of our emotions, all of the frequencies that we generate, like a vampire, this thing is feeding off of us. Now, from there, that took us into the topic, the controversial topic, but the super cool topic of black goo, and the likelihood or the potential for some alien life form, an artificial intelligence, to be here on this planet at this time. Do all planets have some kind of inner intelligence? Gaia, planet Earth, we talk about that being alive. And Ryan himself mentioned like the blood, the life force of the planet. So did some alien stuff come here back in the day? And if so, if that was some kind of invasion, for lack of a better term, does that explain everything we've been talking about tonight in relation to us building out the technology that seems to be almost driven by something behind the scenes, something even bigger and, more nefarious, more hidden, more secret than these elites that we point to all the time? Call it demonic, call it a parasite, or call it black goo. Now, Ryan, is it the black goo or some kind of offshoot from that is driving things today, that is pushing us in the direction of Homo Technicus and the changes that are happening all around us?
I think black goo is more of a vehicle to advance that agenda. If you've ever seen the movie Prometheus, I mentioned that in the last segment, the android, the cyborg, well, he's an android, actually, not a cyborg technically, David takes the black goo out of the canister that is a bioweapon used by the engineers to create and destroy life in the Alien series, and he gives it to one of the main characters, and that further progresses very rapidly an evolutionary shift. And that transitions, as a prequel to the Alien movie, that transitions into what would later become the Xenomorph. And you see this type of symbolism in movies and television shows and music videos. You see it in movies like District 9, which also, when the officer is sprayed with the bio weapon, the black goo stuff, when he's doing a raid on one of these alien compounds, it transforms him partly into an alien. You look at one of the agents in the Matrix, and when he tries to, as a virus, spread, and he puts his hand into people and it turns them into an agent, it's a virus spreading. And this substance, this gooey substance comes up, it's kind of a gray-black substance, comes up their body in almost identical form to what happens to Spider-Man when he becomes Venom. It's this black, viney goo substance that kind of crawls up and takes over the body, just like Lady Gaga in her Fame commercial for the perfume. Just like
we've got a new Venom movie coming out. I think it's this week, Ryan.
That's right. We do have a new movie called Venom coming out. I'm going to go see that. There's going to be tons of black goo symbolism in that. I mean, Venom is essentially black goo. And then there's, to bring us around full circle, Kev, there's a movie called Lucy. And I know that you said that you have seen that before. There's a scene towards the end of the movie where Lucy turns into, she was a human, and she begins to rapidly progress and advance in evolutionary terms until she turns into this supercomputer, which is represented by black goo. And she rapidly advances so quickly that she becomes the technology. She becomes the internet. She is incorporated into the Internet of Things, if you will, much like Johnny Depp is in the movie Transcendence, connected to everything. And part of that control through the connectivity is through nanotechnology. And I know some people have said, well, this technology actually doesn't exist to the degree for which people suggest it exists. There really isn't technology in existence now that nanobots could be used for XYZ purposes. Well, let me give you an example, and you can look this up in a mainstream university publication. Type in sprinkling of neural dust opens door to electrocuticles. And that comes up in a search engine from Berkeley News. Berkeley News. And they talk about these batteryless sensors that could be used to stimulate nerves and muscles. And the advancement of this technology could be used to literally bring a body perceptually back to life, to control motor functions. And that's just one element. It could also be used to shut down organs in the body, make it look like you had a heart attack, make it look like your liver failed, your kidneys failed, make it look like your lung collapsed, something happened that you died of a natural cause when it was really a form of nanotechnology. Now, of course, when you look at the work of the Kurzweils and the Musks and the Googles and the Silicon Valley elite, as they might refer to themselves, they all talk about this too. Ray Kurzweil said, quote, nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Now, see, the thing is, as we were discussing earlier, Kev, all of the matter around us already is infused with information. Not only is it infused with information, it is information. And when we observe it, when we see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, or hear it, we decode that information. It's just ludicrous, the type of wording that they use. And he says that rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent creatures. Well, that goes back to the earliest belief, as far as I know it, and that's called animism, a belief that everything, rocks, trees, are conscious. But see, this gives these companies the ability, at least they think so, to control everything that their system is connected to. That includes the Internet of Things, and brings us back to Lucy, and brings us back to transcendence, and Lucy as this black goo transforming into a supercomputer. You see a very, very similar type of symbolism, a very, very similar type of activity in the Transformer movies. In the Transformer movies where a car turns into a giant robot. It's called programmable matter. And if you've ever seen, this is a really, really, you could even look this up on a search engine and see images of it. There's a scene in one of the prequel Alien movies. It is Alien Covenant, where when they respond to this distress signal at the beginning of the movie, and they go to find this down ship, and they come to this planet, and they don't hear any bugs, they don't hear any birds, they don't hear any animals. It's completely silent. And it turns out that black goo infested the entire planet and killed all of the organic life. And there's a scene as they're walking out in the forest, and I'm explaining this because I think this is really cinematically representative of everything that we're discussing, the technology, the black goo, the symbolism, the thought formations, et cetera, et cetera. And this guy steps on a plant, and you see these spores shoot out. And these spores, they have a close-up of the spores that look like programmable matter, something from a cartoon like Big Hero 6. It's in kids' movies, too. Kind of looks like black goo, kind of like Fern Gully, the black goo, the pollution. And it goes into this guy's ear, and it bores into his head. And when that happens, he begins to transform. And as he transforms, later on in the movie, they take him to the sick bay. And there's an alien about to burst forth from him, because that's what we see in these movies. It's very horrific and gory, much more than the original Alien movies. And what happens is his back begins to, his spine protrudes, and you see these spikes come out, and then it rips his back open. I know I'm being graphic, but this is the movie. Rips his back open, blood goes everywhere. And when I watched that, I thought two things. I thought, one, that looks very, very similar to something else I've seen. If you watch the Lady Gaga video, Bad Romance, she literally, in one scene, is standing naked in a room where her back is hunched over, and she has what looks like spines coming out of her back. And in the same music video, she's wearing this all-white outfit. All you can see is her face, part of her face through the cut where you can see her mouth. Her eyes are covered, her nose is covered, and she is kneeling. And I've posted this on Facebook, a comparison. She's kneeling in an identical fashion to the white alien in that same movie. All of it dealing with black goo and possession and parasites and things like that. And so bringing this around full circle, as I said I would, you look at Lucy, you look at the black goo, you look at the technology, you look at the nanobots, you look at the neural dust, you look at the plans from Google and Kurzweil to infuse everything with this technology so that they can have control of everything. Well, what we've seen from the entertainment industry, whether or not we're manifesting this, whether or not this is already happening and we're just being shown this so that we give up our free will, if you will, and accept it and not fight back against it, whether these are aliens, whether they're parasites, we see enough evidence that there is some conscious intentionality to place this in front of us. It's not just for entertainment purposes, because our attention goes where the energy flows. And when we're directing our attention at this, it's helping to build whatever it is that this system is. And this neural dust, when it goes into this guy's brain in the movie, and it's like a parasite, and it bursts out of him, and it kills him, it uses his body as a host. And this alien comes out, and that's what leads to the rest of the Alien Covenant movie unfolding, and you find out everything that happened. That stuff that goes in his ear, that stuff actually exists. That's not just a scene in a movie. Berkeley researchers developed that technology. The military, according to people that I've spoken to, like Harold Kautz, he says the German military has had that for a long time. It's very, very simple to understand when you actually read what the Berkeley researchers developed. And I think what we find with that, Kev, is that this type of technology, both nanobots, nano on that level, the nano level robots, and then nanoparticles, nanoparticulates that can go right through the body, right into the lungs and be absorbed without even breathing it in, this can and is, in one fashion, in one way or another, being distributed to and around the environment for which we live all over the world. Researchers have already found frozen, freeze-dried, red and white and unidentified cells in the environment, just like Ray Kurzweil said. What we're finding is that this technology is most likely spread through food and water and things like that, but it can also be spread through aerosol spraying. And what better way to distribute this nanotechnology across the entire face of the planet than through that aerosol spraying program? And I'm going to bring this around real quick, and I digress. When I spoke to Harold Kautz a couple of years ago, he told me about these things that they remote viewed. I don't know if it's true, but he said that they remote viewed these things, and they also have there's images of this too. Scientifically speaking, this has been done medically, where some of the more people that suffer from Morgellons, not only do they have the tiny fibers, but it looks like they have little insects in their body. And that the stuff that's kind of like an insect in their body, they say that the insect-like material, they say that those weird little spider-like creatures that kind of feels like it's crawling inside of you, on a nano level and even smaller, they say that this stuff feeds off of your DNA. It feeds off of light. It is a parasite. And this insect-like thing, whatever it is identical to the tracking device that was placed in Neo in the Matrix. It was this insect-like mechanical creature that was placed in the body. So what I think we have here, whether it's movies, whether it's technology, whether it's Silicon Valley, is something much bigger than we really can imagine. It's something that transcends all of the divisional aspects, all the politics, all the religion, all the divisions. It's something that transcends the argument of, well, I don't really believe that because that just seems too outlandish. Well, I don't really care what you believe because evidence exists for all of the things that I've shown, for all of the things that we've talked about tonight. It's just a matter of interpreting what the intentionality is behind the usage of that information. And we can sit here and we can debate on what the intentionality is, but nevertheless, the information is valid because we can actually see it. This is not speculation. Some of it is metaphoric, some of it is symbolic, but the rest of it is directly placed in front of us. And I think regardless of what the intentionality is, if we look at the evidence, we can all agree that there's something very, very, very bizarre here, and I will not be the person to sit here and tell you that I have the answer to it all. All I'm doing is objectively looking at the information and following it where it takes me.
Absolutely. And that's why, myself and Jimmy on the show here, we really kind of pride ourselves on never directing people what to think, merely just encourage them to start thinking about what's all around us. And you're right, Ryan, because all of this technology that you were speaking about there, it's not theory, it's fact. And it's interesting you bring up UC Berkeley there, because that's one of the the places I've looked at because of particle accelerators, stuff like this. And they're one kind of place that you really need to keep an eye on, along with MIT and a few others, because they seem to be right on the cutting edge of things like nanotechnology. And I remember, I think it was even when I was leaving school, in the early 90s, when all of this nanotechnology and nanobots were being first spoken about, Jimmy. And this is quite interesting now that I think back and with hindsight and everything we're talking about tonight, because there was a lot of people sounding the alarm when it came to nanobots, much like there's many people sounding the alarm to any new technology that's ever on the horizon. But one of the main theories that was always thrown out there in the media, and it was bandied around, was something called the Grey Goo Scenario. And I find that wording quite interesting, Grey Goo, because this was the fear that self-replicating nanotechnology would eventually consume everything within the planet and keep on reproducing, keep on replicating itself, to the point where the planet itself, Jimmy, would be reduced to a ball of grey goo. Now, I'm wondering if that was almost language for people with the ears to hear and eyes to see, almost a merger of an organic intelligence, the black goo, and maybe some artificial one they were making. And maybe I'm thinking too big here, Jimmy. I don't know. Maybe we're connecting dots that aren't there. But I know you want to add to all of this, black goo and all the rest of it, man.
I do, but you know what? It's really funny. I'm going to take a picture of my notepad here, and I'm going to show you that I wrote down the word Grey Goo on my notepad about a half an hour ago.
Brilliant. But I think there's something to that, Jimmy. We know that they word magic, and they're very specific about the terms that they use because of the programming involved. So perhaps there is more to that there.
Well, I just want to point out that the word entertainment and the word entrainment are very close to one another. And I would submit that entertainment is entrainment all the way down the line. That doesn't mean you shouldn't watch movies or listen to music, but just know that, that is a scientifically developed entrainment technique. Now, about 10 years ago, there was a guy, he wanted to find a cure for cancer. And so what he did was he infused some nanoparticles of different metals, and he was able to set seawater on fire, literally. You can go Google search it or YouTube search it. Man sets seawater on fire. I have personally, I live in the Silicon Valley, and so a lot of my friends through the years, parents were involved in, working at different companies. And one of my friends' mother was involved in building nano machines. And I've personally looked through a microscope and seen a nano machine working off saline. So there's no doubt whether or not this technology does exist or whether it works or not. It definitely does. And I like what Ryan brought to the table with the constant spraying of this material, because in a sense, what's been happening is because it's blanketed everywhere, they're able to energize and complete circuits based on what frequencies you're hit with. And everybody knows, Ryan, you might not know that I spent about 10 years in the wireless industry building cell sites. So I have a pretty good handle on what's going on as far as frequencies and technology goes. And I'll just, say that if I can start seawater on fire with micro particles, these particles would also conglomerate around, he was putting them in with sugar so that these cancer organisms would absorb the sugar, the molasses with the metal particles in it. And then he would hit it with these frequencies and he would disintegrate the tumors without destroying any of the good cells. So nanotechnology exists whether you want to believe in it or you don't. And as far as the gray goo, I mean, to the point that we're seeing people genetically modifying frogs in their garage with $500 kits. I mean, how much further down the road are we from guys doing stuff in their garage with nano machines and turning everything into a gray goo?
It's a very, very good point, and it takes us back really to the title of the show, Ryan. Homo Technicus, because I think everything that we've spoke about tonight does demonstrate that, for anyone out there who doubted we're living in a time of great change, I think we've highlighted that And we've also shown the potential for us to be changing in the near future, be that an organic change or an artificial one. So I'll hand it back to you, Ryan, because we're running out of time, but I have to thank you in case we don't get a chance before the end. This has been such a brilliant conversation, and it kind of sprung out of nothing. And I'm sure the listeners out there, their minds have been open to so many new ideas, so much for them to think about tonight. And in the end of the day, that's the mission of KBS, to give people the best information to think about. And that way, they can form their own opinions and better opinions from that. So I have to thank you for providing that tonight, Ryan.
I'll counter your thank you by saying thank you for having me on the broadcast, Kev, and Jimmy for joining us. You guys have been excellent, and this has been seriously one of the funnest shows I've done in a very, very long time. Maybe one of the funnest shows I think I've ever done. In league with Mr. Clyde Lewis, I'd say, Kev.
Oh, you see, now you've given me goosebumps.
Wow.
Now that's high praise indeed. But Ryan, your final thoughts for the evening, because this has been a lot of topics covered. But what do you say to the audience out there who have just listened to all of this, and take it away, man?
Well, I'd say that from my research, I'm interested in anything and everything. And that subject matter could be food, or as you said earlier, it could be JFK. It's all woven together with that golden thread and with that tapestry. Sometimes when you listen to a radio show, you listen to a guest, you listen to a host do their own research, and they might bring up 50 topics. They might ramble and talk about so many things you can't keep it straight. What I would suggest is, if you're really interested in learning about things that we've discussed this evening, and I'm always learning too, I'm not some great authority on the subject, I would write down a few things that you're interested in. You don't have to rattle them off like I do, or rattle things off like Kev or Jimmy do. Write down a few things you're interested in and focus on those subjects. And if you really allow yourself to lean with the information as opposed to leaning left, right, back, or forward, you'll find that it all does intimately connect. And when you don't try to force something, whether it's, I do the same thing on my radio show, instead of trying to write down, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about, here are all the talking points, I just do it, and I have one theme, and that comes out very, very organically. Just like when you do anything, whether you're playing sports, or, I mean, you can practice, you can get ready for it, but if you really try to dictate every element and aspect of what you're doing, it makes it more difficult, I think. You're more judgmental. So no matter what it is that you're researching, just allow yourself, and even in your own daily lives, it doesn't have to be research, allow yourselves to flow with the current of the information. And that's what allows, I think, myself to, I can't believe that I can say this, be in the same league with people like Clyde Lewis. I can be in the same league with people like Jim Mars, who was a friend of mine. I can be in the same league with people that I grew up enjoying listening to and reading their books, people that I thought were so much smarter than me. And in a lot of ways, maybe they are smarter, but the thing is, I can converse with them. And I'm only 27 years old, by the way. I'm much younger than most people in this field. And I can do that because I just allow myself to go where the information takes me, and I don't have a specific belief to defend. I don't have a faith to defend. I'm not trying to say, hey, believe this. And when someone says that's not true, I combat them and say, no. It is true because, and then I give them a list of details that I'm not really sure if those things are accurate or not. Now, don't get me wrong. I'll defend a point of view if I'm holding a piece of paper in front of me and it says Berkeley scientists develop neural dust, and someone says that's not true, then I'll say, yes, here it is. I have the paper right here. I have the article. I have the publication. But otherwise, just allow yourself to flow with the information, and whatever finds the most interest, whatever you find the most interest in, follow that. And you'll see that if you allow yourself to flow with the information, I know I keep saying that, but I think it's so important. If you allow yourself to flow with the information, it'll take you places that you never thought, or probably never thought, that you'd go. And
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're almost out of time, and flow is the perfect word, Ryan, when you think about it, because you've got to be very fluid. You can't be rigid and, setting your ideas on the first article or the first piece of research you do. You always have to be very malleable, very open, very fluid, and flow where that golden thread takes you. This has been amazing tonight. Please check out Ryan's radio show and his website over at thesecretteachings.info. You'll be able to get that on the show notes. I'll put a link to that. I hope you have all enjoyed this tonight. So much to think about, and really, this has been a great start to the week. We've got Chris and Cherie Geo on here tomorrow. Quantum Connections is on the way, and wherever you are, make it TFR.